Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Glad to have with us on our live line Congressman Tom Reed. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning, Brian. Good to be with you, and wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving this upcoming week.
Well, thank you, and you too, Congressman Reed. And I wanted to get going this morning on the topic of impeachment. You put out a statement, was it a week or two ago, saying that the American people are tired of this? Is this something that you're hearing on the campaign trail and town halls, that enough is enough?
Yeah, I am. There is a tremendous amount of folks stepping forward that are looking at this going, what is going on in Washington, D.C., and what are you doing to help their lives improve day to day rather than playing what they're viewing as political theater and the circus that's associated with this impeachment inquiry. Now I will say there are camps that have solidified one way or the other, that have already made their mind up, and I hear from a lot of folks in both of those camps into should they impeach or should they not impeach? And many of those camps were pre-decided years ago, right after the election of Donald Trump in 2016. So that's not unusual to me. But what I'm hearing is people are saying what I view here. You're talking impeachment. You're talking about overturning the will of the American public who elected President Trump to office, and impeaching and removing him from office. And that is something in our history as a nation has never been done before. And the gravity and the magnitude of this action should be taken into consideration as we discuss it. And I just do not see that smoking piece of evidence that warrants an impeachable, removable offense that they claim to exist here.
Congressman, there is something about President Donald Trump that seems to bring this out of Congressman Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler. You are down there. You're in the Problem Solvers Caucus. You talk to both sides. What is it about the president that gets the bee in these guys' bonnet?
Yeah, there's obviously a camp, and you saw it right after the election in 2016, when they were having people call in sick to school and giving holidays to students because of the reaction they had as a result of the election of President Trump. And, I don't know exactly where it derives from. I know the members that I associate with on a day-to-day basis are much more about governing. They don't carry that type of personal animus, that hatred towards President Trump. They're looking to see what we can agree upon and get something done. And that number of congressmen is growing. That's good, and we're leading it in the Problem Solvers Caucus, so glad to be part of that effort. But, as to where that hatred comes from, I'll defer to those folks to speak for themselves as to what it is. And, obviously the president has a very disruptive style, which can be good and bad, and I get that. He's not your traditional president of the United States, and I think we can all agree upon that. But he's getting things done, and he's turning Washington, D.C. upside down. And that town, if any town in America needed it, D.C. inside the Beltway needs to be disrupted. And let's see what the people do in the next coming weeks on impeachment. But, I just hope everyone takes a deep breath, to kind of collectively stands down and recognize, we have an opportunity here to do some stuff good for the American people. Let's focus on that. Let's focus and put our energy and time and effort into that rather than this political circus of impeachment.
Congressman, you have your contacts in the U.S. Senate. What are they saying as far as what would happen if this goes as far as the U.S. Senate and a trial? I know that some conservatives are predicting that the tables would get turned on the Democrats and the Joe Biden, Hunter Biden issues about the Ukraine would get brought up, and that would hurt the Democrats to go as far as the U.S. Senate. Your thoughts, and what are you hearing there from the Senate?
Yeah, well, what I'm hearing is they're preparing for a trial, because that's what impeachment is. Impeachment is not an oversight tool. Impeachment is not something where you're trying to hold the president accountable just in the House of Representatives. It's a process. And by starting this on the Democratic extreme left side impeachment process, it's going to go, I believe, its course, and that's to a trial in the Senate. And that's what I've always indicated. There's always two sides to every position in any type of case such as this, or in a criminal case, if you want to think of it along those ways. And what you're going to see is the president was talking about corruption. And so then the inquiry, obviously, in the Senate is going to have to go into, well, what was the corruption that the president was concerned about? And that's when you get into the Hunter Biden. That's when you get into the Joe Biden relationship and the withholding of aid in regards by the sitting vice president demanding that an investigation into his son's business into the Ukraine, that he sat on the board of directors, which was historically corrupt, which was still indications are there's still corruption going on associated with the people associated with that business in the Ukraine. And so corruption is a legitimate exercise of executive authority. And I will tell you, when you're talking about taxpayer dollars in particular, going to a foreign country, I would hope everyone could agree that the commander-in-chief, our president, should ask the questions of corruption. We don't want to have money wasted by giving it to a corrupt organization or entity in a corrupt country, and that's the inquiry that I think is going to get a tremendous amount of attention in the Senate. There was something as much as $23 million that went to this company, Burisma, that Hunter Biden was serving on, that most people agree was corrupt, was used to pay bribes and pay type of nefarious activity that corruption is all about. And so hold on to what comes down the pipeline, but I think this is definitely an inquiry that is going to be lit and be investigated, and the Senate is preparing for it.
Talking this morning with Corning Republican Congressman Tom Reed. Congressman, over the weekend, there was a story in the news, the national news, about Defense Secretary Mark Esper firing the Navy Secretary Richard Spencer over Spencer's handling of a case of a Navy SEAL who posed for a photo next to an Islamic State terrorist corpse in Iraq, and I guess the long and the short of it is the president was sympathetic to this Navy SEAL, and many wanted this Navy SEAL thrown out of the Navy. What do you make of this whole controversy?
Well, you're referring to the Gallagher case, and
Eddie Gallagher.
I was so glad to see that he was not convicted of the murder charges that he was accused of. I mean, he was in a military situation, taking on extremists in regards to terrorists that he was charged with attacking and going after, and that's what this case stems from. And I think what you have here is the classic civilian control over military operations, and sometimes the military doesn't like that. And what you see here is the Secretary of Navy who wanted to pursue this case further than just that overturning of the the lack of a murder conviction on Mr. Gallagher, and then was going to potentially do other disciplinary things to Mr. Gallagher. And what the president said is he didn't agree with that. And as the commander-in-chief, that is clear. That's civilian ultimate command over the military. And by disregarding that, I guess the Secretary of Navy had his own position on it. And the bottom line is this will work itself out. And the Secretary of Navy has now resigned, and civilian control is well established and well ingrained going forward. And we'll see where it goes from here. But my hope is, we can put this behind us, recognize that I think justice was served, justice was done in this case, and that Eddie Gallagher can get on with his life like he wants to, like I see his public statements. He wants to retire and quietly enjoy his family going forward, and that's my hope, and that the Navy and the military focus on what they should be focusing on every day, and I know they do, generally to a great extent, and that is getting prepared, training, and making sure that our men and women in the Navy do the mission when called upon and get home to their families as safe as sound and as quick as possible following the completion of the mission.
We're speaking this morning with Congressman Tom Reed. Congressman, you spoke recently about the national grid issue. That's a downstate issue. If you could give us a little background on it, and then talk about the what you said in last week's press call.
Well, what we're looking at is National Grid is a utility provider, not only downstate, but upstate too. And what Governor Cuomo is doing is essentially threatening this company and saying you need to turn on natural gas supplies to businesses and to residents down in the service area down towards the city, else he's going to yank their license to do business in New York State. And what National Grid said, and rightfully so in my opinion, is, well, we don't have access to natural gas here in New York State because the governor banned the development of it, and then also has banned the construction of pipelines to get that natural gas into the service areas that National Grid said it can't do because it doesn't have access to that natural gas. And so what you're seeing is this extreme environmental agenda that Governor Cuomo is carrying out in Albany, as well as Albany itself is carrying out, come to volition. You know, they don't have access to natural gas, and now what the governor's going to do is say, well, you can't do business in New York State. We're going to pull your license. And why does that impact us up here? Because National Grid, when that request was made, it did not limit it to natural gas delivery in this service area towards the city. It was talking about pulling the entire National Grid permit to do business in New York State. That's our electric provider. That provides utilities to people of Western New York. It's a great corporate citizen in regards to been here for many years and just trying to do its job. And here you got an extremist trying to pull its license to do business based on a policy that they created, a situation that the extremists created, and that's just not right. It's just not fair, and it also puts a lot of people in harm's way. And then finally, what was amazing to me is that the governor was quoted as saying, well, if you can't put it through a pipeline, then truck it and get it to there some other way. Well, we just had a trucking death because they were trucking natural gas across New York State from Pennsylvania to the north, and we just had a tractor-trailer of natural gas that got involved in an accident where the driver was killed. So, you know, truck driving natural gas on our roadways is not a safe alternative to the long history of pumping natural gas through pipelines. And the pipeline battle is all not about pipelines. It's about environmentalism and it taken to an extreme level that's represented by this extreme environmental agenda out of Albany.
We're going to take a quick break. We're talking with Congressman Tom Reed this morning. And when we come back, we'll talk about the Problem Solvers Caucus that Congressman Reed both founded and runs with Republicans and Democrats in Washington. Stay with us.
There is a season for all things under heaven. Throughout the years, things are always changing. But as we return to the season of Thanksgiving and Christmas, it is what stays the same that really matters most. I'm Stephen Walker. If heirloom quality jewelry is in your plans for this Christmas season, please visit my shop at 1 Main Street in Andover. Our local craftsmanship in gold and silver has been an expression of love, faith, and pride of heritage for many seasons and more to come. Holiday hours are 9 to 6 weekdays, 10 to 4 Saturday, or anytime on the web at walkermetalsmiths.com.
Back with Congressman Tom Reed on the Newsmaker Show. Congressman Reed, last week the Problem Solvers put out the Problem Solvers Caucus put out a statement about the continued government funding. What was it, that, if you could reiterate what you said and tell us a little bit about that?
So the importance of a Problem Solvers Caucus statement is when we issue one formally, it's on behalf of the 48 members that make up the caucus. And what that means is you got 24 Democrats, 24 Republicans that have indicated, you know what, we can support this position or this piece of legislation or call for this action. And we represent, you know, what I would say is we're kind of a mirror of Congress itself. And so if you can get 48 members to come to an agreement, and what we came to an agreement on in this case was the spending bills, that resonates in Washington, D.C., I know, and it should send a message across the country that, look, this is where people are agreeing. This is where members of Congress are finding common ground. And so what we've had in Washington is a complete failure of Congress to do its job when it comes to spending. And this is driven often by leadership politics, not and it's something that, you know, a couple people, maybe the top 4 people in both the Senate and the House, can't come to an agreement because they're worried about politics rather than doing the right thing. And so we've had spending fights. You know, the government shutdown fights. Everyone's familiar with them. That's what we're talking about here. We're talking about, you know, just Congress, do your job. Do your job in regards to funding the government and negotiating where you can and find that common ground so you keep the lights on. And then if you can't keep the lights on, you know, what they do in D.C. is they do what's called a continuing resolution, which is essentially another way of saying, well, we couldn't come to an agreement and we don't want to shut the place down. So we'll just kind of leave the lights running on their own. And then there's no oversight. There's no change in policy levels as to what is needed, what's not needed when it comes to spending. And it creates a complete inability to plan, a complete lack of resources and waste of money, because you can't operate in multi-billion-dollar, if not trillion-dollar agencies when you don't know if the money's going to be there a week from now, 2 weeks. Now we got till December 20th. And then how are you supposed to plan for the rest of the year? How are you supposed to hire new people if you don't know what your funding levels are? And so it creates a tremendous amount of waste. And our Problem Solvers Caucus said, stop doing that to our leadership, to those 4 people in particular. They stay in the room, hash this out. It's about spending levels. Don't bring politics into that room. Don't bring in things like the border wall and the other issues that they're trying to get into the mix. And just argue and negotiate spending and give these agencies the budgets they need so they can make their plans for the rest of the year. And that's what we said is a sweet spot. That's where people come together and say, that is good faith running of the government, and that's the way it should be done. And so hopefully I know that statement's already made an impact. This past weekend I got a call from the White House and indicated how positive this was in regards to the developments trying to get this December 20th date done and behind us for the entire year, rather than get into another stopgap week by week type of spending arrangements.
Congressman Reed, Sean Hannity on his radio show says that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi these days is pretty much influenced, run by, controlled by Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the squad. Your thoughts on that statement from Sean Hannity?
This is what I said months ago, and I agree with Sean. That vocal minority of extremism that's represented in the Democratic Party, maybe best publicly by AOC and the squad, if you would, as you comment. But that's that group of extremists, those Democratic Socialists, the socialist wing, the Democratic Socialist wing of the Democratic Party, has taken it over. She can't stop it. She used to be able to stand up to it. She used to be able to push back on it, and she tried to do it here recently. But impeachment, obviously, is probably the tipping point that people will look back and say, this is when it broke. This is when it took over, that extremism took over the entire Democratic Party in the House of Representatives, and it's been building. And that's why I tell folks, I go, the Democratic Party and the ideas that they are producing as their mainstream policies is not the Democratic Party of your grandma or grandpa. This is the party that has been taken over by socialists, that have been taken over by these policies that truly are not sustainable, give a false sense of security, and don't take up the real issues of the day, and is all based on populist rhetoric that is going to not be something that can be enacted, but it's something that is extreme, and it could tear the country apart if followed. And my concern is now we have a Democratic Party that is overtaken by it. My hope is that more of the sensible governing members of the Democratic Party will step up, push back on it, and we'll see where it goes. But in the meantime, we as a country have to deal with this, and I'll tell you, we're going to do our part in my office to be a voice of trying to bring those people together, bring those different factions together. And it's probably going to be the factions which I refer to as the silent majority of America. It's that silent voice that in numbers is the majority portion of American beliefs, and try to unite those silent majorities on the left and the right to get something done. And these extremists on the left now, and we've had extremists and continue to have extremists on the right that you always got to be keeping an eye on. But the bottom line is, let's try to listen to the silent majority voice in America for the foreseeable future. That's where we can get things done. That's where we can come to an agreement. And that's where people's lives get improved day to day.
Congressman, we're down to about a minute or so, and thank you so much for joining us today, Congressman Reed. You talked about extremists, and that got me thinking about some of the statements that I see on your Facebook and Twitter pages. You take a lot of criticism from those I would describe as on the far left, and some really nasty comments from the far left on your Facebook page. I get the sense, Congressman, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I get the sense that people that make these comments, and they're often troll-type comments, They want to create the impression that everybody is miserable and upset with President Donald Trump, and they don't like Trump, and they don't like anybody that likes Trump, and they're trying to create an impression for the middle of the road types that President Trump is not the way to go, and anybody who supports him is how should I say it, intrinsically evil.
Yeah, yeah, deplorable is the term they've used before.
Right.
Deplorable, intrinsically evil, as you indicate.
Do you get the impression that these people are trying to create an impression for others?
Sure. I mean, that's what the vocal minority does, especially when they're driven by extremism. And what I believe in is, in democracy, you have the ability to express yourself, and even if it's an expression that at times can be very offensive to those that are receiving it, that can be very extreme in regards to the rhetoric that is carried out and the behavior, to be perfectly honest with you, that we've seen exhibited across the country and right here in our backyard at certain of our public events. And what I believe is in democracy, I try to carry forward what my mom always told me, growing up. And she was an amazing woman, just an amazing woman. We know who we are. And if you know who you are, it's easy to stand in the public, stand in private, and do what you believe in. Do it in a way that respects people. Do it in a way that encourages the conversation, doesn't shut it down, and then move forward with the people that you can bring together. And it takes a village. The old adage, it takes a village to make things run, and that's how we did it in our household with my 11 older brothers and sisters. And that's what I'm trying to do in the way we conduct ourselves in this office. Is look at, you want to scream, you want to yell, you want to engage in this extreme rhetoric. That's obviously your right, but I have a right not only to listen and show up and take it, but I have a right to express myself and maybe express those views of the silent majority that are intimidated to stay at the sideline. I will tell you, I'm not going to be intimidated. I will stand there, I will take it, but I also will express my opinion as to what those positions are, and the extremism, the radicalism, and God forbid when it goes to a physical act, we're going to make sure that we stand firm and not be intimidated and try to listen to that silent majority and carry out the will of the people that are represented across all spectrums. And that takes hard work, because you can listen to the small voice, you can listen to the vocal minority. That's the easy thing to do. In my humble opinion, the harder thing to do, and I encourage elected officials to follow this adage, is not just listen to those that are screaming and yelling, but also go and seek out those that are sitting on the sidelines and get their point of view and get their input and proactively try to listen to that voice also.
With that, we've got to run. But Congressman Tom Reed, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, great to be with you, Brian. And at Thanksgiving time, got to give thanks to those firefighters over there in Hornell and the community for coming forward on that devastating situation. And thank you for being an advocate for getting the resources necessary to those families that were devastated by those fires, Brian. You did a great job raising awareness of the need.
Don't know what to say. Thank you so much, Congressman, and that was very nice of you to say about the firemen, too. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. God bless everyone. Take care.